It's 2025, and TikTok is still fighting for its life in America. The company has spent over $2 billion trying to convince Washington they're not a threat. They've hired armies of lawyers, opened transparency centers, and promised to store American data on American servers. They've done everything short of putting the Statue of Liberty in their logo. And yet, none of it seems to work. The bans keep coming, the deadlines keep shifting, and ByteDance keeps finding themselves right back where they started, facing down another existential threat from the US government. So what's really going on here? Why does TikTok's US strategy feel like watching someone try to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon? Because this isn't just a story about an app. It's about a company caught in a trap they can't escape, no matter how much money they throw at the problem. Let's rewind to understand how TikTok got into this mess. When the threats first started ramping up in 2019, TikTok did what any smart company would do. They tried to distance themselves from China. They insisted they were separate from ByteDance's Chinese operations. They claimed user data was stored in the US and Singapore, far from Beijing's reach. But here's where the plan started cracking at the seams. TikTok had 170 million users in the United States by 2024. That's more than half the country's population. These users were spending an average of 95 minutes per day on the app, nearly an hour and a half. To put that in perspective, that's more daily time than people spent on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. And all that usage was generating serious money. ByteDance's global revenue hit $120 billion in 2023. For context, that's more than Netflix, Snapchat, and Twitter combined. The US market alone was responsible for roughly $16 billion of that revenue. So when TikTok says, "We're just a social media app," Washington looks at those numbers and sees something else. A foreign company with unprecedented access to American minds and wallets. China's national intelligence law requires all Chinese companies to hand over data when the government asks. No warrant needed, no questions asked. The government can literally take ownership of your company if they feel like it. And ByteDance? They're still a Chinese company. Their headquarters are in Beijing. Their founder, Zhang Yiming, is Chinese. Their investors include Chinese state-backed funds that poured in $3 billion during their Series D funding round. So when TikTok says, "We're independent from China," Washington asks a very simple question: prove it. And that's the trap. Because ByteDance can't fully separate from China without essentially destroying their entire business model. Their algorithm, the secret sauce that makes TikTok so addictive, is developed in China by over 3,000 engineers in Beijing and Shenzhen. Their AI infrastructure is fundamentally intertwined with their Chinese operations. It's not just about moving some servers. It's about unwinding a $220 billion company's entire technical foundation. Enter Project Texas, TikTok's grand plan to win over America. The idea was brilliant on paper. Store all US user data on Oracle's servers in Texas. Let Oracle monitor everything. Create a whole new corporate structure called TikTok US Data Security, with American executives making decisions about American data. Build transparency centers in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., where outsiders could inspect the code. Cost? $1.5 billion. And that's just the initial investment. The ongoing operational costs were estimated at another $700 million annually. The result? Washington yawned. Because while TikTok was building this elaborate infrastructure, investigative reports kept emerging. In June 2022, BuzzFeed published leaked audio from 80 internal TikTok meetings. The recordings revealed that ByteDance engineers in China accessed US user data at least 14 times between September 2021 and January 2022. One employee said, "Everything is seen in China." Another admitted Chinese teams had supreme access to US data. TikTok protested each time. They explained the context. They insisted these were edge cases, legacy systems being phased out, misunderstandings blown out of proportion. But that's the problem with trust. Once it's gone, every explanation sounds like an excuse. In December 2022, Forbes reported that ByteDance employees in China used TikTok location data to track American journalists. The company admitted this happened, but fired the employees involved and claimed it was an isolated incident. Then in March 2023, investigators found that despite Project Texas, Chinese engineers still had access to the recommendation algorithm's back-end systems, the very systems that decide what 170 million Americans see every single day. And here's what makes Project Texas even more tragic. Even if it worked perfectly, even if they achieved complete data separation, it still wouldn't solve the fundamental problem. Because the real issue isn't just about where data is stored, it's about who controls the algorithm. Think about what TikTok really is for a second. It's not just a video app. It's a content recommendation engine that happens to show videos. The algorithm is everything. It decides what 170 million Americans see every single day, what they laugh at, what makes them angry, what they believe about the world. And that algorithm is controlled from Beijing. TikTok's recommendation system processes 1 billion videos daily. It analyzes watch time, replays, shares, comments, over 10,000 data points per user to build psychological profiles more accurate than anything that's ever existed. Now, TikTok has offered multiple times to hand over algorithm oversight to Americans. They've proposed partnerships, third-party audits, all sorts of arrangements. But Washington keeps asking the same question. Who can change the algorithm? Who decides what gets promoted and what gets suppressed? And the honest answer? ByteDance's 3,000-plus engineers in China. This is where TikTok's US strategy hits a brick wall, because separating the algorithm from China means fundamentally breaking what makes TikTok special. The machine learning models that took 8 years and billions of dollars to develop, the AI infrastructure processing petabytes of data daily, the continuous improvements, all of that is developed by ByteDance's core team in Beijing. You can't just photocopy that and hand it to an American team. And even if you could, even if TikTok created a completely separate American algorithm, ByteDance would still own the company, which means Beijing could still theoretically exert pressure through ownership, through regulations, through the countless levers available to a government that doesn't particularly care about respecting corporate independence. A 2023 internal ByteDance document leaked, showing that company policy explicitly states they must uphold correct political direction and promote socialist core values. That's in their corporate guidelines. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. At this point, the TikTok debate in Washington isn't really about TikTok anymore. It's become a proxy war for America's relationship with China. And that's a war TikTok cannot win through transparency centers and data storage solutions. In March 2023, TikTok CEO Shouzi Chu testified before Congress for over 5 hours. He faced hostile questions from both Democrats and Republicans. A poll taken immediately after showed 67% of Americans supported banning TikTok, up from 42% just months earlier. When Trump threatened the ban in 2020, TikTok thought it was about one president's vendetta. Then Biden took office, and instead of rescinding the ban, he launched even deeper investigations. In 2023, Biden signed a bill allowing him to ban TikTok if ByteDance didn't sell to US owners within 180 days. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. Being tough on China is one of the few things both parties agree on right now. A 2024 Pew Research poll found that 81% of Americans view China unfavorably, the highest number in decades. Banning TikTok polls well with voters worried about national security. It makes politicians look decisive without actually requiring them to do the hard work of comprehensive data privacy legislation. TikTok has become the perfect political punching bag, and the financial stakes make it even more complicated. TikTok generated $14.7 billion in U.S. ad revenue in 2023. American small businesses spent $2.1 billion advertising on the platform. Over 7 million U.S. businesses use TikTok for marketing. Every time TikTok launches a new initiative to address concerns, new policies, new partnerships, new promises, the goalposts shift. It's not enough to store data in America. It's not enough to have American executives. It's not enough to spend $2 billion on compliance, because the underlying question has changed from, can we trust TikTok, to, should we trust any Chinese company with this much influence over American minds? And no amount of corporate restructuring can answer that question in a way that satisfies Washington. So here we are in 2025, watching the same dance play out again. ByteDance has spent over $2 billion trying to appease American regulators. They've hired the best lobbyists money can buy, spending $7.4 million on lobbying in 2023 alone. They've made promise after promise, implemented policy after policy, and it's all failing for one simple reason. They're trying to solve a political problem with a technical solution. The irony is that while ByteDance is simultaneously being called a spy by Americans and a traitor by the Chinese, they've built something genuinely revolutionary. An app that went from 0 to 170 million US users in just a few years. A platform that's changed how we consume content, discover music, even shop. An algorithm so powerful, it keeps users glued for 95 minutes daily. But none of that matters when you're caught between two superpowers playing geopolitical chess. TikTok's US plan keeps failing because fundamentally, there is no plan that can work. Not when you're a $220 billion Chinese company trying to operate in America during a new Cold War. Not when trust has evaporated and politics have taken over. Not when 170 million users and $16 billion in annual revenue still isn't enough to buy political goodwill. ByteDance can keep trying. They can spend another billion, build another data center, make another promise. But until something fundamental changes, either in US-China relations or in ByteDance's ownership structure, they're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The question isn't whether TikTok's next plan will work. It's whether any plan ever could.